I'm Mila, 29 years old, and for 18 months, my mother dragged me through court trying to prove that my grandmother, Margaret Marshall, had been senile when she wrote her will. 18 months of accusations, rumors, and public humiliation, where she called me a gold digger, a manipulator, and an ungrateful grandchild who had taken advantage of a helpless old woman. But what she didn't know was that my grandmother had been preparing for this moment for years, and the truth was hidden deep inside the mansion she left behind. It all started 2 years earlier when I received a call at 6:47 a.m. from Hartford General Hospital telling me Grandma had been admitted with congestive heart failure. And within 3 hours, I was on a flight from Portland, my hands shaking the entire way, because despite being 84, she had always seemed indestructible to me. The woman who raised me after my mother walked out when I was 7. The woman who planted roses with me in the garden and held me when I cried at night. But when I arrived at the hospital, my mother Karen was already there, perfectly dressed with her designer scarf and cold expression, barely acknowledging my presence as if I were nothing more than a stranger in the hallway. And when I asked to see Grandma, she told the nurse I wasn't immediate family, words that cut deeper than anything she'd ever said before. So I waited until she left for lunch and slipped into Grandma's room, where machines hummed softly around her fragile body. But when she opened her eyes and saw me, they lit up with warmth, and she squeezed my hand, whispering that I shouldn't believe anything Karen said about her, because she was still sharp and knew exactly what was happening. And then she mentioned something strange about William's room, my grandfather's hidden study, telling me that if I ever needed answers, I should remember it. Though before I could ask what she meant, my mother returned and accused me of manipulating an elderly woman, planting suspicion in the nurse's mind and whispering as I left that she had recorded everything. Words that didn't make sense until 3 days later when Grandma passed away quietly while I held her hand. And 2 hours afterward, Karen arrived putting on a flawless performance of grief, crying loudly in front of the staff, even though she hadn't been there when it mattered. But the real explosion came a week later when our family gathered at the office of Grandma's longtime attorney, Harold Jennings, for the reading of the will. Because when he announced that the mansion, valued at nearly $7 million, and all its contents were being left to me, while my mother received only $1, the room erupted in chaos. Karen accusing me of fraud, manipulation, and elder abuse, swearing she would challenge the will in court and destroy my reputation if necessary. And she kept that promise by launching a lawsuit that dragged on for months, while she spread rumors through every social circle in Hartford, telling people I had isolated my grandmother and stolen her fortune, rumors that cost me my job and any chance of finding another, because every firm I applied to had already heard her version of the story, leaving me alone in the massive, silent mansion, wondering how my life had fallen apart so quickly. Until one night, I remembered Grandma's strange words about William's room and finally searched the library, where I found an old book titled First Principles on the third bookshelf. And when I pulled it, the entire shelf shifted with a mechanical click, revealing a hidden door coated in decades of dust, behind which was a small secret study filled with old furniture and recording equipment, and a metal box with a note addressed to me, inside of which was a USB drive, a camera, and a handwritten letter from Grandma explaining everything, explaining that Karen had been borrowing money from her for years before eventually threatening and manipulating her into handing over more and more cash, even forging signatures and using emotional blackmail to keep the money flowing, and that she had recorded every single visit as proof because she knew one day Karen would accuse someone else of wrongdoing, especially when she discovered that the will left everything to me. So when I opened the files on the USB, I found 147 videos spanning more than a decade, each one showing Karen demanding money, lying, or threatening her own mother, while Grandma reluctantly complied out of fear of losing contact with me. And the amount stolen over the years totaled more than $2 million, evidence not only of financial exploitation, but of a cruel pattern of manipulation that shattered any illusion of the loving daughter Karen pretended to be. And the final video, recorded just a week before Grandma entered the hospital, showed her speaking clearly to the camera, explaining that she had left the mansion to me because I was the only person who had loved her without conditions, and that Karen had treated her like nothing more than an ATM, confirming that she had passed every cognitive test and was of sound mind when she wrote the will, proof that my mother's entire case was built on lies. Yet, instead of revealing everything immediately, I waited because I wanted Karen to face the truth directly. So I spent months working with Harold and a forensic accountant to organize the evidence, while Karen continued her public campaign portraying herself as the victim, until finally the court ordered mediation 18 months after the lawsuit began. And that morning, we all gathered in a sterile conference room at the Hartford courthouse, where Karen arrived dressed in black like a grieving widow, accompanied by her husband Richard and her aggressive lawyer Victoria Smith, while Aunt Patricia watched nervously from the back of the room. And after Karen delivered a dramatic speech claiming that my grandmother had dementia and that I had manipulated her into changing the will, the judge turned to me and asked for my response. So I calmly connected the laptop to the screen and explained that my grandmother had been documenting everything for years, a statement that made Karen's confident smile vanish instantly. And when the judge allowed me to play the final video, the room fell silent as Grandma appeared on the screen, speaking directly to Karen, calmly revealing the existence of 147 recordings proving every threat, every stolen dollar, and every lie, explaining that copies of the evidence were already with her lawyer and accountant, and that the only reason Karen wasn't already facing criminal charges was because she hoped her daughter might still find a shred of decency, but warning that if she continued the lawsuit, the truth would destroy her completely. And as the video ended, I looked across the table at my mother, whose face had gone pale as the reality of the situation finally sunk in, because in that moment, the carefully constructed narrative she had spent 18 months spreading collapsed under the weight of undeniable proof, and the woman who had tried to erase me from her life realized that the real story had been waiting patiently in the shadows all along, recorded piece by piece by the one person she had underestimated the most, my grandmother.